The ceremony of reward. The grand hall of the alien council was filled with silence. Columns of stone and metal reached high into the ceiling, glowing with faint blue lights. Warriors, nobles, and leaders from many star systems had gathered to witness the moment. At the center of the chamber stood the human soldier, his uniform scarred but clean, his face calm though his heart carried the weight of battle. He had fought side by side with aliens in their war against the invaders. He had bled in places where no human had ever stood before. Now, he was being honored in the way the alien culture believed was the highest reward. But for him, it felt like something darker. An elder of the council rose, his cloak shimmering with threads of gold. His voice echoed across the chamber. This human, this warrior, has shown courage beyond compare. He stood when others fled. He defended our strongholds. He broke the enemy's line. For this, we give him what no outsider has ever received. The elder clapped his hands, and guards stepped forward, dragging a young alien woman into the light. Chains rattled around her wrists and ankles. Her head was bowed, long hair covering her face. She wore the simple robe of a slave. Though her posture revealed she was once something more. Gasps ran through the crowd as the elder declared, "She is yours, human, your reward, your property. Take her, and let all see the honor we give you." The hall buzzed with murmurs, some aliens nodding in approval, others watching with narrowed eyes. The human soldier stood still, his gaze falling on the girl. Her shoulders trembled, and though she tried to remain silent, her lips moved, whispering something only he could hear. "Please," she breathed, "do not take me." He felt a tightness in his chest. In all his battles, he had seen death, fire, and cruelty. But here, in the heart of peace, he saw another kind of cruelty, one hidden under the name of honor. The girl slowly lifted her face, and he caught her eyes, wide and full of fear, yet deep with a strength that chains had not fully broken. The elder gestured impatiently. "Take her, human, she is yours." The guards pushed the girl forward, forcing her to her knees before him. The chains clinked as she bowed her head to the floor, her hands shaking. All eyes in the hall were locked on him, waiting for his choice. The human bent slightly, reaching not for the chains, but for her hand. His voice was steady, but it cut through the silence like a blade. "She is not my property," he said. The crowd froze, whispers rising sharply. The elder frowned, his expression twisting in confusion. "Do you reject our gift?" The human's hand closed gently over the chain, but instead of pulling her closer, he unclipped the lock and let the shackles fall. The sound of the metal hitting the stone floor rang louder than any trumpet. The alien girl gasped, lifting her head in disbelief. The guard stepped back, unsure of what to do. The human helped her rise to her feet, his hands steady and respectful. Her lips trembled, her voice breaking as she whispered, "Why would you do this?" He looked at her, his eyes firm yet kind. "Because respect is stronger than chains." The chamber erupted in shock. Some shouted in anger, others in awe. Never before had a warrior refused such an honor. Never before had anyone freed a slave in front of the council. The elder slammed his staff against the ground. "This is an insult," he roared. "You spit on our traditions." But the human did not flinch. He stood tall, the freed girl at his side. "This is no insult," he said firmly. "This is humanity." The girl stared at him, her heart pounding with emotions she could not name. She had expected to be claimed, broken, and used. Instead, she had been lifted, respected, and seen. Her chains lay shattered on the floor, yet the hall was now filled with a new kind of weight. The crowd's reaction grew louder, tension rising like a storm. Some called for punishment, some for praise. The alien leaders exchanged uneasy glances. In one single act, the human had challenged centuries of custom. The girl's fingers tightened around his arm as she whispered, "They will hate you for this." The human's eyes did not waver. "Then let them hate," he replied. For the first time, the alien girl felt something stronger than fear. She felt hope, and the hall, filled with anger and whispers, waited for what would happen next. The human's decision. The council chamber remained in chaos. Whispers, shouts, and gasps filled the vast hall like waves crashing against stone walls. Never in living memory had anyone dared to refuse the reward of the council. The alien elders looked at each other with shock, their pride wounded, their authority questioned. The young alien girl stood beside the human, her wrists free for the first time in years. Her skin bore the marks of shackles, faint scars that told the story of her captivity. She kept her head low, still trembling, unsure if she was truly free or if this was only another cruel trick. The human soldier placed a steady hand on her shoulder, not to command her, but to comfort her. The elder who had given the gift slammed his staff once more, the sound echoing across the chamber. "You dishonor us, human," he growled. "Do you think your way is higher than ours?" The human's gaze was calm, yet sharp like steel. "I do not dishonor you," he said, his voice firm. "But I will not own another living being. That is not honor. That is not victory. That is slavery." The words struck the council like arrows. Some elders hissed in anger, others shifted uncomfortably. And among the crowd, whispers began to spread, not of outrage, but of wonder. Could it be possible that honor was not in chains, but in freedom? The girl slowly raised her eyes to him, her voice breaking in a whisper. No one has ever done this for me." The human leaned closer, so only she could hear. "Then it starts now." Outside the chamber, rumors spread quickly through the city. Slaves whispered to one another of the human who broke chains. Free citizens argued. Some mocked him as a fool, others called him noble. And the girl, still dazed by her sudden freedom, walked quietly beside him as they were escorted out of the council hall. But even in freedom, fear lingered. The guards who led them away exchanged dark glances. The human noticed, his hand instinctively resting near his weapon. He knew he had not only defied tradition, he had made enemies. As night fell over the alien capital, the girl sat with him in a quiet chamber prepared for honored warriors. She touched her wrists again and again, still surprised to feel skin instead of chains. Her voice trembled as she finally asked, "Why? Why would a human refuse such power? They offered me to you as a prize. You could have had a servant for life. No one would question you." The human looked at her with steady eyes. "Because power means nothing if it destroys who you are inside. Because respect makes allies, not slaves." She studied him in silence, her eyes filled with something new, confusion, awe, and a spark of hope. For so long she had been told she was nothing more than property. Now someone had told her she was worthy of respect. It felt like learning how to breathe again. Suddenly, a knock came at the door, sharp and urgent. The human stood quickly, hand ready on his blade. The door slid open, and a young alien boy rushed in, his face pale. "They are angry," he whispered breathlessly. "The council, the nobles, the ones who profit from chains, they are calling you a danger. They say you insulted our honor. You must leave. They will not forgive this." The girl's heart pounded. She looked at the human, fear in her eyes. "I told you, they will hate you." But he only gave her a calm nod. "Let them." He turned to the boy. "Thank you for warning us." The boy swallowed hard. "I only did what I thought was right. If you stay, they will kill you. They cannot let your defiance spread. Already the whispers are growing among the slaves." The human understood. One act of mercy had planted a seed of rebellion, and those in power would do anything to crush it. That night, under the dim glow of alien moons, the human and the girl slipped through the city. The streets were alive with shadows and whispers. Everywhere they passed, pairs of eyes followed them, some hopeful, some fearful, some filled with hate. The girl clutched his arm tightly, whispering, "Why do you not regret what you did? You lost their favor. You made enemies everywhere." The human looked up at the sky, where stars burned bright and endless. "Because some things are worth the risk," he said, "and no one deserves chains." His words sank deep into her heart. She realized then that her life had changed forever, not because she had been given to him, but because he had chosen to free her. But she also knew the price of his choice was only beginning. Far behind them, in the council chamber, the elders gathered again, their voices low and sharp. "This human is dangerous," one hissed. "If his actions inspire others, the order of our world will collapse." "He must be silenced," another said, "before respect replaces fear." And in the quiet of the night, as the human and the girl walked into uncertainty, a storm was already forming against them. The alien girls passed. The city was quiet, but the silence felt heavy. The human and the girl moved through narrow streets lit by dim blue lamps, their footsteps soft against the stone. Every shadow seemed to hide eyes. Every sound made her flinch. Yet beside her, the human walked steady, his presence strong, like a shield against the darkness. They stopped in a deserted courtyard, where broken fountains whispered with trickles of old water. The girl sat on a low stone bench, her hands trembling as she touched her wrists again, as if to remind herself the chains were truly gone. For a long moment, neither spoke, the silence pressing around them. Finally, she lifted her gaze, her voice low and filled with pain. "You should know who I was before they gave me to you." The human crouched beside her, his eyes calm and patient, waiting. She took a deep breath, her words slow. "I was not born a slave. I was born into a warrior house. My family held honor. Our blades protected this city for generations. When the war began, I fought too, side by side with my brothers." Her eyes darkened as memories surfaced. "I fought with pride. I bled for this world. But when the enemy pushed into our lands, the council betrayed us. They promised reinforcements, yet none came. My house was destroyed, my family slaughtered. I was captured, not by the enemy, but by my own people. They sold me to prove their loyalty to the nobles. They broke me, chained me, stripped me of name and honor." Her hands tightened into fists, tears shining in her eyes. "For years I was passed from one owner to another, treated as less than an animal. Every time I tried to stand tall, they beat me down. They called me useless. They said I was alive only to serve. I believed them, until today." She looked at him then, her voice shaking. "Why? Why free me, when even my own people would not?" The human studied her for a moment before answering, his tone steady. "Because you are not what they made you. You are more. You fought, you endured, and you still stand. That is strength no chain can take." Her lips parted as if to speak, but no words came. She had expected pity or empty comfort, but instead, he gave her something she thought was lost: recognition. For the first time in years, she felt seen, not as property, not as a prize, but as a person. A cold wind drifted through the courtyard, carrying faint echoes of distant voices. The girl shivered, pulling the robe tighter around her. "They will hunt us. The council will not allow this insult to stand. You freed me, and in doing so, you challenged them." The human nodded. "I know. But why risk it?" she whispered. "You could have taken their reward, lived in safety, and no one would have blamed you." He answered softly, "Because safety built on cruelty is no safety at all, and if I accept slavery for you, then tomorrow it will be someone else, and another after that." Her heart pounded at his words. The chains may have left her wrists, but his voice was breaking the ones still wrapped around her spirit. She realized then that freedom was more than unlocked metal. It was the belief that she deserved to live with dignity. As they spoke, footsteps echoed in the alley beyond. The human's eyes narrowed, his hand moving to his weapon. 3 shadowed figures appeared, their armor carrying the crest of the council guard. The leader stepped forward, his voice cold. "You dishonored the council. Human, come quietly, and perhaps we will show mercy." The girl froze, fear flooding her chest. But the human stepped in front of her, his stance steady. "Mercy does not come from chains," he said. The guards tightened their grips on their weapons, tension sparking in the air. The girl grabbed his arm, whispering desperately, "You cannot fight them all. They will kill you." He glanced back at her, his expression calm but fierce. "Then we fight for more than survival. We fight for what is right." The guards lunged forward, but before the clash could ignite, a shadow moved from the rooftops. A stone dropped, striking one guard's helmet and sending him staggering. From the darkness above, voices whispered, "This way, human, hurry." The girl looked up in shock. On the rooftops, slaves and outcasts crouched, their eyes burning with hope. They had heard the rumors, they had seen the act of defiance. And now, they were ready to risk everything. The human grabbed her hand, pulling her toward the hidden path. As they ran through the narrow passages, the girl's chest heaved. She whispered, "Do you see what you have done? Your choice is spreading." The human's voice was firm, almost grim. "Then it must spread, because one act of respect can light a fire no chain can put out." Behind them, shouts of guards filled the streets. But ahead, for the first time in years, the girl felt a path opening before her. Not as a slave, not as a broken prize, but as someone who could choose her own steps. And beside her, the human who had dared to free her walked forward, unafraid of the storm gathering around them. Whispers of rebellion. The city stirred with unease as dawn touched the horizon. The alien towers glowed faintly under the rising suns, but the streets below were restless. Whispers traveled faster than the patrols of the council guards. Every corner, every marketplace, every hidden cell where slaves labored carried the same rumor. The human had broken chains. In the dim halls of the worker barracks, voices trembled with hope. He freed her, one slave whispered, eyes wide. He touched her chains and let them fall. Another shook his head in disbelief. No one defies the council and lives. But even in doubt, there was a spark, something long forgotten flickering again. The girl walked beside the human through a narrow street that smelled of dust and iron. Her robes were still torn, her wrists still raw, but her head was higher than before. For the first time in years, she dared to walk without bowing to every passing noble. The human noticed the change, though he said nothing. His silence carried respect, a quiet strength that told her she was free to stand as she wished. They reached a ruined storehouse, hidden in the shadow of the outer walls. Inside, a handful of aliens waited, slaves, outcasts, broken soldiers. When the human entered, their eyes lit up with both fear and admiration. "You are the one," whispered an elder slave, his back bent but his voice steady. "The one who defied them." The human gave a small nod. "I freed her," he said simply. "But freedom is not mine to give. It belongs to all who choose it." His words spread through the room like fire through dry grass. The girl watched, her chest tightening. She realized this was bigger than her. What he had done for one had awakened the hearts of many. But danger was close. Far across the city, in the chambers of the council, the elders argued bitterly. "He undermines us," one hissed. Already the slaves whisper rebellion. "Crush it now," another demanded. "Before it grows, make an example of him." Their decision was swift. The human must die, and the girl, too, for she had become a symbol. That night, as the human and the girl rested in the storehouse, a young messenger slipped inside, his breath ragged. "They are coming," he warned. "The council has sent hunters, not guards, hunters who kill without question." The girl's heart leapt into her throat, fear flashing in her eyes. But the human only tightened his grip on his blade, his expression calm. "Then we must be ready." The rebels around them exchanged worried glances. Some trembled, others clenched their fists. For years they had lived in silence, beaten into obedience. Now they faced a choice: hide in fear or rise with courage. The girl stood, her voice unsteady but growing stronger. "You all know who I was," she said. "I was once a warrior, but they broke me. They told me I was nothing, and I believed them, until this human showed me respect." Her eyes swept across the room, meeting the gaze of every alien who listened. "If he can risk his life for freedom, then so can we." Her words struck them deeply. For the first time, slaves lifted their heads with pride instead of shame. The human placed a hand on her shoulder, nodding with quiet approval. She was no longer speaking as a broken prisoner, but as a leader. Outside, shadows moved. The hunters were already near, their cloaks blending with the night. Each step they took was silent, each blade sharp with deadly intent. The council had no patience for symbols of hope. Suddenly, the girl's sharp ears caught the faint scrape of metal against stone. She stiffened, whispering, "They are here." The human's eyes narrowed. He motioned for the rebels to stay quiet, then drew his weapon, the steel glinting faintly in the dark. The first hunter slipped through the window, silent as a shadow. But the human was faster, his blade flashing. Sparks lit the dark as steel met steel, the clash breaking the silence with thunder. Gasps filled the room as the rebels watched the human fight. Not for conquest, not for power, but to protect them. The girl seized a broken staff from the floor. Her body moved with old instincts, the training of a warrior not fully lost. She struck one hunter across the head, the force of her blow surprising even herself. For the first time since her capture, she felt the fire of battle burn inside her again. The fight raged through the storehouse, shadows twisting in the flicker of weapons. Rebels grabbed tools, chains, and stones, joining the struggle. The hunters, skilled and merciless, pressed hard, but the human and the girl stood firm. Side by side, they fought as equals, not master and slave, but comrades. When the last hunter fell, silence returned, broken only by the sound of heavy breaths. The rebels stared at the human and the girl, awe filling their eyes. One whispered, "If they can bleed, they can fall." Another said, "If one human can stand, so can we." The whispers grew louder. Not whispers of fear, but of rebellion. The girl looked at the human, her chest rising and falling. "You have lit a fire," she said softly, "and it will not go out." The human met her gaze, his voice steady. "Then let it burn, until no chain remains." And in that ruined storehouse, among slaves and outcasts, the first breath of a rebellion was born. The escape and betrayal. The night air was thick with smoke and fear. The storehouse walls still carried the marks of the battle, broken beams and shattered stone. But inside, the fire of hope burned brighter than ever. Slaves, outcasts, and broken soldiers stood together, whispering about rebellion, whispering about freedom. The human wiped his blade clean, his face calm though his eyes were sharp. He knew this was only the beginning. The council would not rest, not after losing their hunters. They would send more, stronger forces. And soon the city itself would turn against him. The girl sat close, her breath still heavy from the fight. Her body ached, but her spirit felt alive. For years she had been told she was nothing, a prize, a tool, a servant. But tonight, she had fought again, and she had stood at the human's side. The old fire of her warrior house glowed within her chest. "Where will we go?" she asked quietly. The human glanced at the gathered rebels, their tired but determined faces. "Not away," he said. "Forward. If we run, they will crush us one by one. But if we strike together." His words filled the room with silence. Then slowly, one by one, the rebels nodded. For too long they had obeyed. For too long they had whispered in chains. Now, they were ready to stand. But not all hearts were steady. In the shadows, a man watched the human with narrowed eyes. He was thin, with sharp features, and his chains had only recently been broken. To him, freedom was terrifying. Whispers of rebellion promised war, and war meant death. Fear twisted inside him until it grew into envy. Envy of the human who commanded respect so easily. As dawn broke, the rebels prepared to leave the city. Hidden passages through the old tunnels beneath the walls offered escape. The girl led them through narrow stairways and broken gates, her knowledge of the city guiding their path. The human walked ahead, his eyes always searching for danger. But danger was closer than he knew. At the last tunnel, the thin man slipped away, his heart pounding. He found the council guards waiting in a quiet street, their armor gleaming in the rising light. His voice cracked as he whispered, "They're in the tunnels, the human and the girl. You'll find them there. Just let me live." The guards exchanged cold smiles. "Live?" one muttered. "You have already chosen chains." By the time the rebels reached the tunnel's end, the trap was already closing. The girl froze as the sound of marching boots filled the passage. The human's eyes narrowed. "They know," he said quietly. "Someone told them." A sudden crash shook the walls as soldiers poured into the tunnels, their weapons gleaming. The rebels panicked, some shouting, others raising crude weapons in defense. The girl clutched her staff tightly, her voice trembling. "We've been betrayed." The human stepped forward, his stance unshaken. "Then we fight our way out." The clash erupted in the darkness. Blades rang, torches burned, screams echoed through the stone. The rebels fought desperately, their fear turning to fury. But the soldiers pressed them hard, driving them toward the walls. In the chaos, the girl caught sight of the thin man, hiding at the edge of the tunnel. Her eyes burned with fury as she realized the truth. "You," she cried, her voice cutting through the noise. "You sold us." The man flinched, shame flashing in his eyes, but before he could speak, a soldier's blade struck him down. His betrayal ended in silence. The human fought like a storm, his blade moving with precision and power. Every strike carried not just skill, but conviction. The rebels took courage from him, rallying to his side. Yet the numbers were against them. Up there, the girl shouted, pointing to a broken stairway leading to the surface. The human nodded, cutting a path toward it. Go, he ordered. Get them out. The rebels surged toward the stair, their hope clinging to his voice. But as the girl climbed, she looked back. The human stood at the base of the stair, holding the line against a tide of soldiers. Blood streaked his arm, his breath sharp, but his stance never broke. Her heart twisted, torn between fear and admiration. Come with us, she cried, her voice breaking. The human glanced up, his eyes steady even in the storm. I will, he said. But first, I hold the door. The rebels poured out into the open air, the dawn painting the sky in red and gold. The girl stumbled into the light, her chest heaving. Behind her, the sounds of battle roared. Every clash of steel carried the weight of his sacrifice. She gripped the stone wall, her nails biting into the rock. Her whisper was filled with both dread and hope. He will not fall. He cannot fall. But deep inside, she knew the truth. The human was not only fighting for survival. He was fighting for a cause larger than himself. And the council would stop at nothing to silence him. As the sun rose over the alien city, the rebellion had its first true battle. But it would also taste its first true betrayal. The battle for freedom. The dawn light spread across the alien city, painting the towers in shades of red and gold. But beneath that beauty, war had begun. The rebels stumbled out of the tunnels, bloodied, exhausted, but alive. Behind them, the human still fought, his blade flashing like fire in the dark. The girl's heart hammered as she turned back, unable to leave him. Through the smoke and shadows, she saw him holding the stair, cutting down soldier after soldier. Every strike was precise, every movement filled with strength. Yet blood stained his arm and shoulder, his breaths heavy. He was only one man against many, but he stood as if he carried the weight of 1,000. Go, he shouted once more, his voice echoing like thunder. Take them to safety. The rebels hesitated, but his command pushed them forward. The girl, however, could not move, her feet rooted in place. I will not leave you, she whispered, her voice shaking but fierce. Then, with a final surge, the human broke free of the stair and leapt into the open. He landed beside her, his blade dripping with blood, his chest heaving. But his eyes still burned with fire. Then fight with me, he said simply. The city square erupted as soldiers surrounded them. Rows of armored troops closed in, their banners high, their orders clear. In the rebellion before it spread beyond control, the rebels formed a circle around the human and the girl, clutching makeshift weapons with trembling hands. Fear filled their eyes, but hope burned there too. The first wave of soldiers charged. The human raised his blade and met them head-on. Steel clashed, sparks flew, cries of battle filled the air. The girl fought at his side, her staff spinning, striking with skill she thought long lost. Every blow reminded her that she was no longer a slave, but a warrior reborn. The rebels joined, striking with fury born of years in chains. Though untrained, their desperation gave them strength. Each fallen soldier proved that the council's power was not unbreakable, and the whispers of rebellion became roars. Above the chaos, horns sounded. More troops marched in, their armor shining like polished stone. The human's jaw tightened. This was not just a fight for escape. This was the battle that would decide everything. The girl's voice rang out, fierce and clear. Stand. Stand for freedom. Her cry carried across the square, reaching every ear. The rebels roared back, their courage ignited. For the first time, they did not fight only for survival. They fought for a future. The battle raged like fire in dry grass. The human cut through the enemy with strength that seemed endless. But wounds marked his body, blood staining his uniform. Still, he stood tall, his presence unshaken, his spirit unbroken. Every time he struck, the rebels grew braver. Every time he rose again, they shouted louder. Then came the council's champion. A towering alien warrior in black armor stepped into the square. His blade was heavy, his eyes filled with contempt. You are no savior, human, he growled. You are a fool. The human tightened his grip on his sword, his voice calm but firm. Then face this fool. The duel shook the square. Blades clashed with deafening force, sparks flying in the air. The champion struck with raw power, but the human answered with speed and precision. Each strike sent shockwaves through the rebels, who paused to watch. The girl's heart pounded, every movement of the fight carved into her memory. The champion struck hard, cutting across the human's side, blood spraying into the dust. Gasps filled the square, but the human did not fall. He staggered, then straightened, his eyes blazing. With a cry that shook the sky, he drove his blade into the champion's chest. The black-armored giant collapsed, silence echoing for a heartbeat. Then the silence broke into roars. The rebels surged forward, their courage unstoppable. The soldiers faltered, their lines breaking under the tide of fury and hope. The council's banners burned, their shouts drowned by the cries of rebellion. The girl fought beside the human until her arms ached, her voice hoarse. But in the chaos, she saw the impossible. The soldiers were retreating, the council's forces breaking under the weight of defiance. The human stood tall in the center of the square, his blade raised, his chest heaving. Blood dripped from his wounds, but his eyes still burned. The girl rushed to his side, her hands trembling as she touched his arm. "You should not be standing," she whispered, her voice breaking. He looked at her with a faint smile. "I told you, respect is stronger than chains." The rebels gathered around them, shouting victory. But the girl knew the war was not yet over. This was only the first battle. Yet in this moment, hope had won. And the human had proven that one act of respect could lead to an army rising. The city square, once filled with chains and silence, now echoed with the cries of freedom. A new beginning. The city was quiet after the storm. Smoke curled from broken towers. Banners of the council lay in the dust. The cries of battle had faded into whispers of relief, whispers of freedom. For the first time in generations, the chains had been broken, not by decree, but by defiance. The rebels gathered in the central square, their bodies bruised, their weapons chipped, but their spirits alive. Around them, soldiers who had once served the council threw down their arms. Some fled, some surrendered, some even joined the rebels, ashamed of the chains they had once defended. The council elders had vanished into the shadows of their halls, their power shaken, their pride shattered. In the heart of the square stood the human, his blade lowered, his body weary. Blood marked his wounds, but he did not fall. The girl stood beside him, her staff resting against the ground, her eyes scanning the faces around them. Everywhere she looked, she saw hope, fragile, trembling, but real. A young rebel stepped forward, his voice breaking with emotion. "You gave us back our voices," he said to the human. "You gave us back our courage." The human shook his head, his tone calm. "I did not give you anything. You already had it. You only needed to see it." The girl's eyes softened, her chest tightening. Once, she had believed she was nothing more than a prize. Now she stood tall, her scars no longer shame, but proof of survival. And beside her stood the man who had reminded her of her worth. The rebels began to chant, not his name, but one word repeated again and again. "Freedom, freedom." The sound rose like thunder, rolling across the square. Even the walls seemed to tremble at the force of it. The human raised his hand, silencing them. His voice carried strong and steady. "Freedom is not mine to give. Freedom belongs to you. Keep it, protect it, live it, never let chains return." The girl stepped forward, her voice clear. "And remember, respect is stronger than fear. We rise not as masters and slaves, but as equals." Her words struck the crowd with the same force as his. For she was no longer just the freed one. She was a leader reborn. Together they stood, human and alien, side by side. Two beings from different worlds, yet united by the same belief. And in that unity, the rebellion found its true strength. But the human knew the fight was not finished. The council still existed, their army scattered but not destroyed. Whispers of vengeance would grow in the shadows. And beyond the city, other worlds still lived in chains. This was only the first spark of a greater fire. That night, under the twin moons, the rebels gathered around fires in the square. They shared food, stories, and songs long forbidden. Children laughed, their voices no longer silenced by fear. And the girl sat beside the human, watching the flames dance. "You changed everything," she said softly. The human shook his head. "No, you did. You chose to stand, you chose to fight, and now your people will rise." She looked at him, her eyes shining. Then let us rise together. The human's gaze met hers, steady and calm. He saw not a slave, not a prize, but a warrior, a comrade, an equal. He gave a small nod. Together, he said. The fire crackled, the stars burned above. And in that moment, the beginning of something greater was born. Not just rebellion, not just war, but a new path where chains would break and respect would rule. The girl closed her eyes for a moment, listening to the laughter, the voices of her people free. It felt unreal, like a dream she had once buried deep inside. Yet it was real, because one human had chosen respect over slavery. And that choice had changed not only her life, but the fate of a world. As dawn broke again, light poured over the city, no longer the council's city, but theirs. The human stood with the girl, facing the horizon. Neither spoke, for words were not needed. The silence was no longer heavy with fear, it was filled with promise. And so began a new chapter. A chapter not written by rulers or chains, but by those who had risen from the dust. The rebellion was not the end, but the beginning, and its first lesson would be remembered for generations. Respect is stronger than chains.